So 12th in the Prem for me, the team who is going to get relegated at the end of the season, I believe it's going to be Worcester Warriors. And the reason I think it's going to be Worcester Warriors is mainly they have been floating around the 11th, 10th spot over the past couple of seasons. They finished 10th last year, and they've been floating around there for a while, always in a relegation scrap. But they always had one or two star players who could get them out. And they seem to have lost those star players now. I mean, Ben Teo's gone. Of course, he's gone to Toulon. They've lost Josh Adams, who's gone to Cardiff. They've lost Jack Singleton, who's gone to Saracens. You know, they've lost these world-class players who are obviously in search for higher level rugby. They've lost these big name players that were helping them get out of the danger zone. Josh Adams was scoring the tries. Jack Singleton with good runs. You know, Ben Teo was a brilliant player for them as well. They were just getting them out of sticky situations, and I feel like it's going to be a struggle for Worcester to have those incomers that they're having, like Ed Fido, who's been playing in the World Cup. Players like that coming in, I think they're going to struggle to fill those boots, because I don't think these players that they brought in are as good. And yeah, they're good. Don't get me wrong, they're good, but I feel like they're not good enough to keep a team like Worcester up. And Worcester, for me, just don't have those star players like most other teams do. They have a couple. They've also brought in Graham Kitchener, who will help add experience. But for me, the outgoings that they've had is going to have a real effect on them. And that having incomings to try and fill their boots might be a struggle for them, having to start in a new club, just slowly building up. They might hit top level come the end of the year, but I think they'll have a slow start. But if I compare them to teams around them, you know, like London Irish and teams like that, I don't see them as having as good of a squad as the teams around them, and therefore I think that for me, Worcester are going to get relegated. I do think it'll be close. I think they will be there or thereabouts, but I don't think they're good enough, or their team's good enough to keep them up this year. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's only by a point where they get relegated. And they've been up and down that sort of relegation battle for so long, and I think it's going to have an effect. And unfortunately, I've put Worcester to go down in 12th. So in 11th, I think it will be London Irish. Now, the recently promoted side, and my God, have they made some signings. Gee, they have made a load of signings. Half of them are at the World Cup at the moment. Of course, one of the big ones, Sekope Kepu, the Aussie, brilliant player. They brought in Waisaki Naholo and Sean O'Brien from Leicester. How they've managed to get these players to come to Irish is unbelievable. They've obviously got a plan ahead to not get relegated again, and to hopefully do what Bristol have done almost, to build and become a stable Premiership side. And these players are brilliant. They're brilliant signings, especially for a team who have just come up. And it's going to be an entertaining season for them. It's going to be interesting how they go. I don't think they're going to start very well, because all these players, most of them are going to be at the World Cup, so that's going to be a bit slow for them coming back. Of course, they're going to have a rest beforehand, so the depth I don't think is there for Irish. So at the start they'll have a slow start. When they come in, I do think they'll also still be quite slow before they get going, because it's pretty much a brand new team. Half the team who brought them up from the Championship isn't really there anymore, or they're more behind the scenes. So I think it's going to take a while for them to mould and to blend. That's why I think that they'll struggle this season, because they need to blend. They need to do what Bristol did. They need to blend them together. But with the World Cup also involved, it's got quite a struggle, and I don't think they'll probably start firing any shots until mid-January almost. And when they start firing shots, when they start playing well, they will be brutal, and they're going to be so hard to beat with these players. But yeah, it's all about having to mould them all and to make them play well as a team, because as I said, it's practically a brand new squad. So on that front, it's going to be hard for Irish, but I do think they have the quality to stay up, but they just have the quality above Worcester to stay up. I after this season they'll probably start getting much better, but for now I think it's more of a stabilising season, just build, just make the squad blend for upcoming seasons and just stay up. I think that's the aim for Irish. So I think they'll be happy with 11th, and yeah, that's where I think they'll finish. In 10th, this is a difficult one because it's so crumped in that area that it's really hard to put a certain team in 10th, or because the team in 10th could really realistically finish in 5th. You never know, but for me I think I'm going to go with Wasps, and this may seem like a shock, but they didn't have a great season last season, and half of those players who didn't have a brilliant season, like Willie LaRue, Joe Simpson, Elliot Daly, have left, and they've brought in some decent players, Matteo Minozzi being one of them, who can really add a new dynamic to the squad, but I just think that there's still not enough there, and I feel like Wasps are a bit behind at the moment compared to everyone else's squads. That they were up there, but in the past seasons they haven't really recruited anyone of standard to help them push up. I think they have done good recruitment this season, but I don't think their squad is good enough. Of course, they could shock me, they could finish 5th, and to be fair, that gap between pretty much 12th to 5th, even 4th, is very close, and so they could finish much higher than 10th, but I just don't think they're that good anymore than they were. Last season they weren't good. Of course, all those players have gone, and they were such big game players, and it's going to be hard to live without them, and a bit like Irish, they've got to mould these new players, but there's still a core there at Wasps. There's still a big core that is useful, and of course Dai Young's still staying. I thought he would leave after last season because it was such a poor season. In fact, he's staying is good, but I feel like Wasps will struggle a bit this season. I feel like they're going to go through what they did last season. They weren't really good on the road last season. They did beat Exeter away, which is good, but other than that, they weren't great on the road. They'll be hard to beat at the Rico, like they always are, but I feel like they've become much more beatable, and I feel like that will carry on this season, and it's more of a rebuilding job at Wasps. I think that they'll struggle. They could prove me wrong, but ultimately, yeah, I think Wasps will be 10th. In 9th place, I think, will be the Leicester Tigers. Last season was, quite frankly, appalling for Leicester. They weren't very good at all. They nearly got relegated. They were in the relegation fight until pretty much a week before the season ended, and Leicester didn't want to be in that position, and they ended up in that position. I think they'll be there again. I think they'll be struggling again this season. They have brought in a few recruitments, Lavanini being one of them. They've brought in alright recruitments. I don't think there really is enough there to help them go forward, but I feel like the Leicester squad anyway was underachieving last season, as it was, and they've got a very good squad there. Leicester have a very good squad. Of course, they've got Manu Tuilagi, they've got George Ford, they've got Johnny May. They just really underperformed, and I don't know whether it's Gordon Murphy, whether it is the issue, or whether it's backroom in the coaching, whether it was sacking Matt O'Connor so early last season. I don't know whether that was the issue last season, but for me, again, I think they're going to struggle. I think it's rebuilding for Leicester. I think they're looking forward into the seasons, looking forward, not really looking at this season, which could be a bad thing in the long run, in the short term of this season. It could be a bad thing, but yeah, I don't know if they'll do that well again this season. I think they're going to struggle again, and their rugby last season wasn't great at times. Most of their players weren't really playing at their finest. Of course, they had a lot of injuries. They'll be back now, but they don't have the depth there like they did seasons ago now. They don't have depth there, and half the team being at the World Cup isn't helpful, of course, but most teams are going to struggle with that. But I feel like it's all about depth, and Leicester don't really have that much depth in their ranks. I think they'll do slightly better than last season, but I don't think it's going to be clean sailing. They need to make Welford Road a fortress again. I think it's become a bit too easy for teams to get points there, to win there. Last season they made it too easy. Usually teams fear going to Welford Road. It's one of the most feared stadiums in the Premiership to visit because it's so hard to win there, but I feel like it's become much easier to win there. and they need to reinforce Welford Road as as their home, and to make sure teams don't win there, they need to make it a fortress. But yeah, I think they'll struggle again. Ultimately, I don't think the team is still brilliant. They've got one or two amazing players, of course, Johnny May, as I've said, George Ford, Manitou Alangi in the back lines. The forwards is a bit of a weak point. Of course, we've got Ellis Genge, Dan Cole, but I do think the forwards are starting to age slightly. But yeah, I don't see this Leicester team really challenging for top 4, not even really top 6. They'll be there or thereabouts. But I think it's going to be another struggle for Leicester, and I think they're going to finish 9th. In 8th place, I think, will be Bath. Now, Bath are a really hard team to predict, because some seasons they can be really good, really up there. Some seasons they can be relatively poor. And they're a very inconsistent team, Bath. They can play really well, and then the next week they can play really poorly. And I think this is mainly because their away form isn't great, and the fact that the Rec is such a fortress for them. They're so good at the Rec, they're so good at home, that they can just get wins there and sneak 1 or 2 points or wins away from home and just be safe. And yeah, you could do it that way, but they need to be much more competitive on the road than they were last season. And yeah, they're just not really competitive on the road. In the pre-season, of course, in the Premiership Rugby Cup that was going on, it's never really a big indicator, but they were playing some decent rugby. I don't really see Bath as the team playing decent rugby, but they're obviously changing the ethos, they're changing the way they're going about things. Of course, Todd Blackadder left and they brought in Stuart Hooper, former player. That, for me, could be a bad move, really, bringing someone like Stuart Hooper who's recently retired, this being his first real coaching role, being the head coach. Will he be good enough to push this Bath team on? The Bath team is a good team, it's a very good team, but will Stuart Hooper be good enough as a DOR and a head coach to really push Bath on? That's the question for me, and I'm not too sure he is. I think they've got the squad that is good enough, but it's just going to be a bit of a difficult one to predict whether Stuart Hooper is going to be decent or not. We'll have to see, and that's why I feel like Bath's pretty hard to predict, but I feel like they do come out of it, and they do come out pretty well. Last season, of course, they didn't have a great season, but they came out and they finished in the top 6. So I feel like even when Bath struggle, they can get wins, even when they struggle, and they can do well. But I feel like this season might be a bit of a rebuilding for them, and therefore I think they will finish 8th. But don't get me wrong, they could easily finish top 6. They could easily finish top 6. So could Leicester, so could Wasps. But I just think that the bringing in Stuart Hooper and not really changing the squad much like they have is going to be a bit of a struggle. They have a good team, they have a good core, but I don't think they're going to break top 6 this season, and I feel like 8th is the best they're going to get. 7th for me is going to be Quins. Now, I think last season they did very well. They were unlucky to miss out on the semi-final spots, but they did struggle at points, and they were at points very vulnerable in their game. They play brilliantly. I do like the way Quins play, and I think that they are very good. They're a good side, but it's become so compressed, the Premiership, that anyone can finish anywhere, and it makes predictions so hard. But really, I've put Quins in 7th because they can be very vulnerable at times. They can sometimes play really well, sometimes play really poorly, and at the back end of last season they just weren't that good. It makes you think when sometimes the Quins team just doesn't play well, and it's worrying because you don't know why they're not playing well. They just aren't playing well. And I also think with Quins, when they start losing a game, that their heads do go down, and when it's away from them, and it's just hard to predict where Quins will finish. But I think 7th is the right spot. I think they're a good team, don't get me wrong, but they have a good squad, very good squad. Like Danny Kerr, still very good, but I don't think that they've really boosted much in terms of players they brought in. I mean, Campagnaro and Scott Baldwin They're good players, but they're no players who are really going to push them on into top 4 territory. And I still think the Quins team is just lacking that top 4 quality a little bit. And I feel like that almost is why they didn't get top 4 last season. They faced the pressure of being in such a dominant position, looking like they're easily going to get top 4, facing the pressure and then falling off. That could also be another reason, the fact that they could struggle under pressure. But, you know, it's going to be tough. I think for anyone from, as I've said, from 9th could get into the top 4 for me. Quins could easily get into top 4. They're good enough to, but I say they're good enough to, but I just don't think that the squad depth or some of the players are good enough to get there to help them push. It's really hard to predict, to be honest. But yeah, I think Quins will finish 7th this season. In 6th place, I am going with Bristol. Now, Bristol were, you could say they were a surprise package last season, but I'm not too sure they were. I think they were just very good, and they had the team that is good enough to be top 6 at the start of last season, and they nearly got there, but they just missed out, and I think they'll do the same again. I think bringing in someone like Nathan Hughes is such a good incoming. He can add another dimension to their play, and I do like Bristol. I think they're a very good squad. They've got very good players like Charles Piatow, of course, very good, and I think top 6 is almost a certainty for me for Bristol. I feel like they will get top 6. I feel like they're good enough. The way they play is good enough. There are worries for Bristol though, and they play very dangerous rugby. They like to play out from their own 22, and they like to do it almost all the time, even when they're in losing situations. And it's dangerous. It's dangerous rugby. They could easily lose the ball and tries to be scored against them. And that happened last season. They were good, but when they were playing back from their own 22, they lost the ball and they conceded tries. And there's a part of me there that believes the dangerous play could cost them wins that could easily take them further. But I feel like the way they play can be their own downfall, and I feel like it might hurt them. And their defence is not very good when they're conceding ball. So it's just going to be a bit of a struggle if they're going to play like that. If they don't play like that, and if they play their usual attacking game, which is good, if they play their usual attacking game in good areas, then yeah, they're going to score tries. But if they're playing it in their own 22, then the danger for me is that they're going to lose the ball too easily, and they're just going to concede a whole load of points. And that is a worry, and that's why I'm only putting them 6th, because of the dangerous play they have. But I wouldn't be surprised if they do fight for top 4, because they've got brilliant players. They play really well. I wouldn't be surprised. It's just that little bit of danger they have in their game, that the fact that they have no fear could cause them to have a downfall. But I think they're good enough to get top 6. They've got the players to get there, and they've got a very good squad as a whole to reach top 6. I just don't think they're ready for top 4 yet, and the dangerous play they do have can cause them some problems at times, and I think it will again this season, unless they change it, of course. And if they do change it, they could get top 4, but ultimately for me, I think they'll finish 6th and get top tier Europe next season. Finishing 5th this season in the Premiership, I predict will be Northampton Saints. Now, I really like this Northampton team. I think it's brilliant. The crop of youngsters they're bringing up, the way Chris Boyd is trying to go around building this new Northampton Saints team is just brilliant. The way they play, fantastic. I thought they were really exciting to watch last season, and come near the end of the season, definitely one of the most formed sides at the end of last season. And it's good that they're coming back, because they've had a couple of bad seasons prior to last one, and they're back now. They're back, and I think they're firing on all cylinders. They look like a very good side, and I think they're going to challenge again. They're going to challenge for the top 4 again. But I do feel that last season they overachieved. Now, this may seem bad, But I do think that. I don't think the team was really a team capable of challenging for the title, yet they put themselves there, which is credit to them. It's big credit to them. If you look at the team compared to other teams in the league, you wouldn't have predicted Northampton to get top 4, and yet they did, and it shows brilliant determination to show everyone what they're about, and they did that last season. But this season I just feel like they're just going to come one step below, and I do feel like it's because of quality. I feel like they lack that little bit of cutting edge quality that could just edge them into the top 4 this season. Of course, other teams have recruited, and some have recruited really well, and it's going to be so tight around that top 4, anyone could get it. And for me, I just believe Northampton will slightly miss out on it. I like the way they play, I like their style, but their defence at times was a bit iffy last season, and if it continues to be iffy, you never know, they could struggle to make top 4 with that. And their away record as well, which wasn't awful last season, it was alright, but they need to get more grinding away wins. If they don't do that, then I don't see them making top 4, but they will be around that mark. They will be around there, and they'll definitely challenge for it. They've got the team ethos to do so, and the way the team plays is just fantastic. Even though the quality isn't massive, they've still got a very good crop of players in their squad who pull off some magic like they did last season. So I expect him to be around there, and I do like Chris Boyd as a coach as well, and I think he'll take Northampton to another top 4 challenge this season, but I think they'll slightly miss out. So in 4th place in the Premiership, I'm predicting will be Gloucester. Now, I really like this Gloucester team. I think they're brilliant, to be honest. They've got everything now. They've got the forwards, they've got the backs. They've brought in new recruits this season to push them going on further. But the reason I have put them in 4th, which is 1 place lower than they were last season, is I just don't think they will reach as much height as they did last season. Last season they were brilliant, and expectation is going to be on them so much to achieve even more this season, and I think it could hamper them a little bit. But it won't hamper them that much, because they did well last season when they had the expectation on them, and they were brilliant. So I think they'll still be brilliant this year. And the fact that other teams around them have also caught up, so the Saints, for an example, have obviously caught up to them in terms of quality now, quality of play, and quality of play is a big thing, and teams have caught them in quality of play. The Saints have brilliant quality of play, Sale, for example, Quins, but I feel like the reason I'm putting Gloucester in this top 4 is their quality of players. The player pool they've got now is brilliant, and Ackerman is building a very good squad with decent depth, and yeah, he's just building a very beastly squad, and I wouldn't be surprised in coming seasons to see him starting to challenge even more for the top 2 places. And it wouldn't be a surprise to me if they do it this season, because they have the team to do so. I just have a little gut feeling telling me that Gloucester aren't going to be hitting as much heights as they were last season. I expect them to pretty much win every game at Kingsholm, even against the likes of Exeter and Saracens. I expect them to do that because Kingsholm is a fortress. They need to get their wins away, and they will definitely do well if they do that. They've just got such a good team now that I feel like they're going to start becoming a top 4 mainstay, and that is why I think they're going to finish top 4. Maybe not as much heights as last season, but I still think they'll reach top 4. 4th place. 3rd place this season, I think. This one could be a shock. I'm going for Sale Sharks. Now, they've been so close over recent seasons to reaching the heights and the expectations that are set for them, because their team is good enough to make this top 4. They've just missed out in the past seasons, and I don't know what it is, but they just can't get wins when they are so close, and they struggle to get really important victories. And I feel like that is an issue, but that's last season. This season, they've brought in more players, more South Africans. They seem to like their South Africans, and it's looking like a very, very good squad. I thought this Sale team would do much better than they did last season. I think they underachieved, really, and I have a feeling that this should be their season. If they don't succeed this season, then things might need to be changing, because I feel like this team is good enough for top 4, and they should be making the top 4 with the team they've got, but they haven't been doing it. But this season, I think it'll be their time, and they've got brilliant play. Their attack is insane. Their forwards is a bit weak, but they've brought in some recruitments to come and fill that void. Gallagher being one of them, being able to fill the voids of a little bit of lacklustre in forwards, being able to slow the ball down, etc. But their attack, their ability to score tries is one of the best in the league. So I expect them to score loads of tries and to be up there with the best teams in this league. And I feel like, as I said before, this is their season. This is their season to shine. They have the team. They've been building it over a couple of seasons now. And if they don't do it this season, reach the top 4, that is, then it's going to be disappointing. But I think they'll do it. I think they'll reach it. I think they've got the attacking play to do it. And I think they've brought in the recruitments in the forwards to help boost that part of their game as well. So yeah, I think they're going to be on for a good season this year, and I think Sale will finish 3rd. Now getting up into the top 2, which is the obvious top 2 as it has been for the last couple of seasons. I think the gap will be close this season. I think it'll be much closer than it was in past seasons, and but I still expect them to be the top 2. And in 2nd, I'm going with Saracens. The reason I'm going with Saracens is because as much as they've got that really good strength in depth, the World Cup, the Six Nations, it's going to hurt them. They lose so many players, not just to England, but to Wales, to South Africa. You know, they lose so many players, and especially during this World Cup period, it's important. And I feel like that they could struggle during these periods, and if they get off to a slow start, then it could be hard to come back from. But I feel like Sarries are that sort of team that has the championship mentality, that if they lose a game, they will come back, they'll bounce straight back. And I think that they'll do that if they lose games during this period, or if they lose just a shock loss. I feel like they'll come back and bounce back. And they've got a very good squad. The depth is still there, even if they don't have the team that they have due to the World Cup. They still have a decent 15, but it's the fact that that depth's now gone. Is the bench really good enough to come back and make an impact like they usually do when their players are at the World Cup? I'm not too sure. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, overall, I think Sarries, I think they'll do well. They've got the team to. Their defence is amazing. Their attacking is getting better, and I expect them to be top 2. But I just think that they lose so many players, it's just going to be a big effect on them, and they're going to finish 2nd. And that means in 1st, again, another season, I'm putting Exeter on top. Now, like Saracens, they do lose a lot of players, but they don't lose as many, and their youth academy is insane. They can literally rely on their youth academy, and they'll still be a brilliant side. They're so good at lifting up those youngsters, and they seem to shine on the big occasion. And this is the time when youngsters can bring themselves into the squad, and I think it will happen with Exeter. I think the team is good enough, even with players going to the World Cup, because I don't think they lose as many. And the youngsters coming up as well, they have a good crop. And yeah, I think they'll take it. I think top 2 is an obvious. I think, as I said, it'll be much closer between the rest of them. I think they'll have closer games, but I think they'll know how to stick it out, and they'll be looking for revenge after that cruel final loss in the final against Sarri. So they'll be looking for revenge, and I think they'll be out to do some damage this season, and I think they'll do that damage. There's not much else to really say on the matter with Exeter, because they're a bit like Sarries all round. They're really good forwards, slowing the ball down, and I like the way they don't always go for points. They back themselves, and with the attack they've got and with the maul they've got, I'm not surprised they back themselves. I expect them to score a lot of tries this season, as they usually do, and I think they're well on their way to securing another top spot this season, thanks to their try scoring and thanks to their defence as well, which has started to grow much better than it has in past seasons. So I expect Exeter to be up there, be top, possibly not the team to beat, because of course Sarries will be that after winning the Premiership last year, but they'll be one of the teams to beat, and people will want to beat them. But I think Exeter are so hard to beat, and that's partially the reason I'm putting them on top. I don't know about whether they'll win the whole thing, of course that depends in the semis and the final, but for the table and the 24 rounds as it is, I think that they will be top come the end of the season. So that is my Premiership predictions. Thank you everyone for watching. Put your comments down below what your predictions are for this season. And as always, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in a bit.